Welcome back.
Now,
Hello, takers. Welcome back to the Geek and the Guru podcast, Series 66, Episode 5. This is Brian Lee, the Test Geek, and beside me, as usual, the Series 7 Guru, Dean Tinney. Hey, Dean, how are you?
I'm great. The last episode. Wow. So another collaboration. I really love these collaborations, Brian, we've been doing on the 66 and the
So much
65.
fun. I agree this, yeah.
And we'll find something more to do after this last episode as well.
That doesn't mean we're going to cry at the end, does it?
Maybe. I love you, bro.
I love you, man. You're not getting my Bud Light, right? Okay, so episode 5, we're still in the laws and regs section. Since it's such a large section, we kind of chopped it up into 2 separate episodes. So we don't do a 2.5-hour podcast. So anyway, what we'd like to start with today is disclosures. That's kind of a general term. It's a large category. But there are certain documents. And Dean, I was working with a tutor student just a few days ago about this. They sent me a test question. And I say, well, wait a minute. Let's first kind of separate these things. Because that's what I do. I separate, therefore I organize, therefore I can retain some of this stuff, right? Because again, you know how much I love reading that law stuff in the textbook. Oh my goodness. So the first thing we want to look at is Form ADV, right? This is the registration document for the IA, which of course is filed with either the SEC for the federal IA or with the state administrators if you're a state IA. Now, let me ask you this, Dean. Do you get much feedback, input from students about questions specifically relating to what should go on that registration statement?
No, I think more, about Form ADV Part 2,
Well,
which is the brochure. And I think I probably, Brian, I'm guilty of this. I probably spend a little more time than is necessary compared to the test on Form ADV Part 1. And are we an S Corp? Are we an LLC or a partnership or a C Corp? And, do I think I sometimes get in the lead on part 1? I think I do.
I have a one-pager, a document, right? Mm-hmm. 1 paragraph 1A, 1 paragraph 1B, 1 paragraph 2A, 1 paragraph 2B. On the back, it's a chart. And that's that simple. I believe there may be a question or two pertaining to what should go on there. And not only the form of business, are we in LLC and S Corp, but I think affiliates is an important issue, right? Because oftentimes IAs are affiliated with broker-dealers, so they can do transactions, trades. They're affiliated with custodians. They're affiliated with insurance companies. So those all have to be listed out. One other important thing on the registration is the name of all the directors and the owners and the partners, because we know, pretty sure, there's a question relating to that, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is that the automatic registration of those people in a separate state? I think people get confused about that. It's not that, they get a free pass, right?
You still have to take the test.
Yeah.
But then you have to go through the registration process.
The other thing I really hammer home, and I think needs to be hammered home on that, is that you're never filing that with both the SEC and state or states. It's one or the other, right? So
that's right. Which is not a bad idea. Reiterating the fact, when we went through federal IAs and state IAs, it's not both. It's never both. It's one or the other. Right.
That's right.
What about effective dates 45, withdrawal dates 60 days?
Well, I say this is probably, Brian, I'd be interested in you. I tell people, would I like you to know everything? Federal and state, yes. But assuming your brain housing group is full, exactly. I always say the state is more important because they are the persons, I was going to say something that I don't want state administrators to hear me say about them, that are compelling you to take the test. So I say, given you can't know it all, stay focused on the template of the Uniform Securities Act, because there's way more questions in the state lane than in that SEC.
I agree. I tell my students the same thing. It's written by NASA. NASA are state administrators, so the focus is going to be predominantly on state. Absolutely. Right. So I guess there may be a question or two on the registration statement itself. Now, this also is a perfect segue because we use often, not required, we use a portion of the Form ADV as our disclosure brochure, right? Which is a federal law that requires disclosure, who we are, what we do, what we charge, how we charge it, all those kind of things, the disclosure brochure. And 9 out of 10 IAs simply use Form ADV Part 2 as their disclosure brochure. Again, it's not a requirement. I think there might be something out in test world that says, do you have to use this? Can you use a glossy brochure instead? Sure, as long as that disclosure information is included.
That's exactly right. I always say, if you have a marketing department that wants to jazz something up, that's fine, but you better make damn sure that whatever would have been said in that is in that whatever that jazzed up brochure is. I always say, Brian, I was a cheap bastard. In my practice, I just used the form itself, right?
Like I said, I think 9 out of 10 IAs do the same thing. I mean, why? Why?
But I have seen packages from investment advisor. I go, oh my God.
I know.
How much they were telling me their opening package, which includes their brochure that makes the disclosures found before me. They were telling me it's like $250. It's got CDs and glossy brochures.
Wow.
I guess I would add to that too, Brian, that you can't charge the customer for your delivery of your documents.
For your marketing, yeah. Well, not directly anyway. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe increase the AUM a little bit.
Right.
And of course, the classic question: when does it have to be at or prior to the contract date with the customer? When do we deliver the brochure? Right?
Yeah. So many of these questions are
not 48 hours prior, then the customer gets that automatic 5 days.
That's right.
That's got to be a gimme question, right?
I call it a layup, indeed.
I do too. Yeah. It's been out there for so long. Right. Must it be resent on an annual basis?
For material changes, I would say yes, or an addendum.
Correct. But let's just say there are no material changes. Must it be resent? I think, again, there's a difference between state and federal here. Yeah. I believe federal IAs must resend it 120 days from their fiscal year end.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that's a requirement for state.
Yeah, people get hung up on the 120 too. It's
versus the 90 that you just mentioned.
Right.
For addendums and
90 is to the regulatory authorities. 120 is to the customer.
That's right. So that's the brochure there. So you're going to get a couple of questions pertaining to that. Okay. One thing I'm going to mention very quickly, and that's the advisor solicitor. Again, here comes my flashbacks.
Yeah.
Right? From those textbooks. I just never could understand that very well. And the differences between an advisor solicitor and client referrals. I don't think they do it very well. I have a YouTube video, free, 18 minutes, that actually illustrates the difference between an advisor solicitor versus client referrals.
I will, Brian, link to that in the video description for folks, and I'll add it to a pinned comment so they can find that readily.
I believe there is a question out there pertaining to, because that's one thing the customer actually has to sign. Mm-hmm. If you're giving advice on behalf of another IA, that IA wants to know that you told the customer about our relationship.
Yeah, back in the day, I was a solicitor for an investment advisory firm. And indeed, I have to say, Brian, it's no doubt I like this person as your investment advisory firm because they're paying me.
That's right.
And this is an acknowledgement that you understand that I am not an employee of that investment advisory, my firm. My firm has been hired by that firm. And you're right. They want to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting who I am. Now, as many times as I've made that disclosure, Brian, I can't tell you how many times I'd be on the floor of the Warrior game and, oh, you're that guy from the investment advisor. I go, no, I am not. I am somebody who solicits on their behalf. Entirely different.
I like to use LPL.
Yeah.
They are the largest independent IAs. So for a lot of mom and pop firms that have a little office in Main Street, USA, they affiliate themselves with LPL, so they don't have to go through the IA process. Right. So now they're soliciting advice on behalf of LPL. So that's where the solicitor disclosure comes in. And then, of course, we have the advisor contract. I've heard several variations of these things, feedback from the students, some fairly basic, actually. What clause? Of course, this is a general. What clause must be included in every advisor contract, right? And the answer, of course, would be, the no assignment clause. And it's interesting because, that's not a term that's intuitive to people. It's a legal term, meaning basically transferring.
That's right.
The contract from one IA to another, right? So, and where it comes into play a lot of times, of course, is when IAs are merging.
That's right.
One IA is acquiring another.
Right on.
It doesn't matter if one's a state IA and the other one's a federal IA.
Yeah, no, sure doesn't.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. What I tell people is, you've hired firm A, you didn't hire firm B. And, and so you can't, that's the chance you take in buying an investment advisory firm, that those folks will agree to that transfer. I joke, they usually try and say, oh, this person will be here Tuesday, Thursdays. They'll be here through the transition. But, the version I always use of that, we had a legendary investment advisor in San Francisco named Gail Seneca, Seneca Capital Management. And she sold her firm to Phoenix Asset Management. And again, I say, well, I didn't hire you guys. Who the heck are you? Right. And I haven't heard that. The other thing I always point out is that you can't write an advisory contract that waives these rights. Right. I can't say, hey, Brian, here's where you're acknowledging that I'm not supposed to do that without your permission or consent, but you're telling me I can. Right. So,
and we see in the textbooks, the practice questions, and I believe that, it could show up on the test too, about the majority partnership.
Yeah.
Really confusing for some. Right. But essentially, if a partner leaves, but they're a minority partner, that remaining firm, right? There's no assignment there because the majority of the partnership is still in place. What I tell people is if that minority partner leaves and takes some of the clients with him, then those clients that are moving over to minority partner, they would have to sign the consent.
Yeah, saying, I understand what's happening here.
That's exactly right. So those are the primary disclosures that we see in the laws and regs sections, Form ADV, the disclosure brochure, perhaps solicitor brochure, and the advisor contract, right? Anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think, like I say, we're trying to do a flyover in these podcast episodes. You're in the gym, you're in your car. We're not trying to give you a lecture on, I think, what are we on episode 5? And if this was a series 66 class, it would be 3 days. So obviously we're trying to hit the high points,
right?
Tell you about the broad avenues and highways of the 66, making sure we don't try and get in the weeds too much. So I don't think I would add anything to that, Brian. I think that's a nice overview.
It is. And I think these highlights, no matter what section it is, this is the core of the exam. These are the core content, core concepts you got to know, right? Yeah. There's a lot of ancillary stuff that can show up, and then that happens on all the exams. Right. This is the core stuff, right?
Exactly. These two sections, disclosure, the way the Supreme Court justice said it is, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So your default should be disclosure, but I think disclosure and ethical, and I always joke the test is kind of negative, unethical business practices.
Right.
What do you think? 25 questions, I think?
It's close to that. Yeah.
There's the two is
right.
I can't think of a bigger area in terms of that.
Can I also, before we get into some of those ethical practices, again, I love hearing feedback from folks, positive, negative, whatever, right? We always are looking for confirmation that, this content's been on there for 27 years. It's still
Brian, just before just don't forget, because I am interrupting and I know I am, But do you get aggravated? Because I get so aggravated with people out there who say, well, nobody really knows what's on the test. Now, we don't know what question 35 is, but we certainly say to people, what were you not prepared for? How could Brian and I better prepare you for this next time you go in the cave to slay the 66th dragon? So I get aggravated with
may I answer that question? I don't know anybody who says that.
Oh, I know.
Remember, I don't listen to a lot of social media.
No, that's true. You say. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go on. My bad.
I don't know anybody who says that. We've been around this test for 25 years.
Yes.
To the exams.
Yes.
And NASA does a phenomenal job with that content outline.
Right. They can't make up on the fly what they're going to test you on. It's got to be within the corners of that document. Absolutely.
I learned 20 years ago that NASA content outline is amazing. It's I mean, you want to know what I need to teach people? Yeah. There it is. Do I need to know what to tell people? Here's your core content. There it is. And NASA is a
and by the way, I would expand that. I would expand my rant just a little bit. It's also aggravating when vendors have stuff that you and I both know people are never going to encounter.
You know, I get aggravated at that. Yeah. Would you like me to go off on one of my textbooks again? But you're right. You're absolutely right.
I'm sorry. I hope I
it's a point that needed to be made. I don't understand why somebody would say, well, you don't know what's on the test. Well, here's NASA's content outline. Yes, I do. Do you use the content outline? I mean, do you know what that thing is? There it is right there. Yeah. So you were saying ethical practices, probably 20.
Yeah, that's why I was saying 25 with disclosures.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. Please regale us with some of your.
So ethical business practice. First thing I would say is that don't lie, cheat, or steal. The other thing I would tell you is the test can be very, very negative. And so a lot of times it's mainly recognizing not what is an ethical business practice, but rather what is not an ethical business practice. Yeah. Whether the format is all the following are ethical business practice except, or which of the following is an unethical business practice. There's some classics that we hope from year 7 you haven't forgot. I always joke, Brian, it's not good if you pass your Series 7 and you go back to your manager and say, I want to sell dividends. I want to make some breakpoint sales. I would do some front running. I want to win the new account contest with fictitious accounts.
Can I sign your account, please?
These would all be bad things. Now, in terms of ethical business practices, it does lead into disclosures. For example, when I was a practitioner, my investment advisory firm, we use Schwab for execution and custody.
Yeah.
And, Schwab likes investment advisory firms because we introduce clients to the broker dealer. So you become not only a client of my investment advisory firm, but a client of the broker dealer. Right. And again, Schwab isn't affiliated with my investment advisory. That would have to be disclosed if that were the case, but it's not. And I say to Schwab, hey, listen, I would like you to pay for things that help me help my clients. By way of a reminder, my clients on the investment advisory firm are your clients too. And I say, hey, I'd like to go to a seminar. And Schwab says, hey, just send us the invoice. No problem. We'll take care of it with your soft dollar compensation. Not a problem. I want some research for my clients. No problems. Send the invoice. We'll take care of it. As I've said, the test is very negative. What can the broker dealer not pay for? Not what they can pay for. Right. And, I like to use here what I call the Sesame Street trick, Brian. I just had somebody the other day. And I said, let's go through the Sesame Street trick. One of these things is not like the other, right? So there's one thing in here that isn't really helping the client of the investment advisory firm. It's only helping the investment advisory firm. So those things that you should definitely be aware of is the broker dealer can't pay travel costs. God knows that would be great, because then not only can I go to the seminar, they can pay for the seminar. I could fly first class. I could stay in a nice hotel. So no travel, no furniture, no rent. So those are the 3 things that we're not allowed to do. Now, the other thing that is important in terms of ethical business practices is custody. Who has your stuff? I used to say, Brian, I can't steal what I don't touch. Now, before I move on to custody, soft dollars, any comments you might have on soft
Yeah,
dollars?
I was going to say, what I like to tell people is there are just a few things that we know we can do. And you mentioned them, right? Software, research, seminar fees. Anything else?
I think it's very unlikely.
No, anything else you can't do. And most times it's what you said, right? Rent, hardware. Oh, what if we pay for your registration fees for all of your new reps?
Yeah, no.
So anything outside, even no matter how esoteric it gets, we know there's three things we can, and essentially everything else we do.
I like it. I like it. Now, a lot of investment advisory firms, it's totally understandable, don't want to mess with custody because it's a major mess, right? I mean, you got to worry about this idea of segregation. And so a lot of investment advisory firms, if they're going to do the custody themselves, are going to have a net worth requirement. And most of us aren't going to do that. Most of us are going to use a broker dealer. And that is a conflict of interest if that broker dealer you're using for execution and custody is affiliated, or if you are as an agent affiliated with that broker dealer. So we have to again disclose to you that I'm both a investment advisor representative of an investment advisory firm that is affiliated with a broker dealer, and I'm an agent of that broker dealer as well. A lot of you are going to be selling wrap accounts, and we need to make sure they understand what products and services of the broker dealer and the affiliated broker dealer, or excuse me, the affiliated broker dealer investment advisory are included in the wrap. Most importantly, what's excluded. Now, my example, I told you I was using Schwab. There is no affiliation there, but I would still have to tell you whether or not I'm receiving soft dollar compensation. I'd have to tell you whether you can use another broker dealer. In my case, I'm going to say, Brian, I'm sorry, you don't open an account at Schwab, I ain't managing your money. But, that would also have to be disclosed. You have any thoughts there, Brian?
Yeah. So we, as IARs, we often use affiliated broker dealers for our transactions. It is a potential conflict, right? Because it seems like we might be double dipping.
Yeah.
And I believe that is the reason for the disclosure, so that we reveal a potential.
Have you seen? I've seen lots of cases where the double dip is not disclosed, and then they find out their brokers make another $1 million, undisclosed.
That's exactly right. So anytime, and I believe this is testable, and you're not going to see 8 of these questions, probably one. That if we use an affiliated or even an unaffiliated broker dealer to do transactions, it must be disclosed.
Always. I haven't had anybody tell me on debrief they've been tested on the client relationship summary on the broker dealer side about those conflicts. Maybe someday, but loans to and from clients.
Well, what a classic question this one.
Yeah, this is all the time. So be careful on the broker dealer side, a little different than the investment advisory side. But here we do not make loans to and from a client. The loan can be made if it's a bona fide lending institution. Now, I think of that, Ryan, as not a living, breathing human being walking planet Earth, but rather an unnatural person. So if it's a bank and you go through the normal process, yes, it's your friend, the banker. No, right? If it's a mortgage underwriting firm and you're getting a mortgage through the normal process, fine. Mortgage broker, no. So not that natural person. Anything you want to add to loan to and from customers? On the
I know those practice questions in the textbooks also include broker dealers, right? Through a margin account. Yeah, right. Where some folks who might be new to the industry might not realize that broker dealers do loan money in the form of margin accounts. So I always think of banks and broker dealers, and that's about it, right? Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Client confidentiality.
I'm sorry, Dean. May I go back to custody? I think there are multiple questions on custody on the exams. On the content outline, there's always 2 or 3 the number next to that section.
You think the 10 grand, 35 grand? No.
No, I think mostly is what defines it.
Okay.
Right. which is direct or indirect access to client funds or assets, right? And you said it at the top, right? If I can't touch it, I can't steal it. Right. And that's essentially it. If you have direct or indirect access to clients' funds or securities, that's custody, right? In order to avoid custody, right, we always have to forward checks. We have to forward.
Yeah, Brian, does that show up? Have you had any debrief about that 72 hours to return the
3 days?
Yeah, to return the check.
The textbook use 3 days. I know the textbooks like to use 72 hours.
I just tell people not to get so locked into a phraseology that, that when they see it said differently, they don't freak out. Like I always joke about myself. I think of the classical balance sheet equation as assets minus liabilities equals net worth. I always freak out when I see it expressed as assets equals liabilities plus net worth. I go, oh, yeah. So just make sure you don't get so locked in that if you see something, just look for that answer expressed maybe the same, but in a different phraseology, perhaps.
Rather than 72 hours, they do 3 days.
Yeah. Right? But again, you're not supposed to have the check. You're not supposed, so either forward it or return it or whatever the case may be.
Because otherwise it'd be custody. And then, that's what then starts all those other regulatory requirements.
my favorite story I use when I'm teaching this concept, right, is this guy had retired from an NFL team, and then he went back to his former teammates and said, Brian, if anybody understands the problems indigenous to being a high-income producing professional athlete, it's moi. If you give me full power of attorney, Brian, I'll treat your money as if it were my own. When they arrested him, he said the money evaporated. I thought, I can't, I thought one of those players might say, Brian, no. Why don't you treat my money as if it's my money?
That's right.
All right, client confidentiality. So I say, hey, Brian, would it be okay if I tell people that I manage money for you? I am not allowed to, unless it's the government, which in case I roll over quickly. But if it's not the government, I have an obligation ethically to protect my client's confidentiality. And I see this broken so many times, Brian. I had a guy who was talking so out of school about who his client was. And I felt like telling him, your client would really be upset if you're putting his business all over, the street, right? So I need permission from a client if I say, hey, can I share this information with somebody? Second point, we have to protect that client information, right? If we have custody of this kind of information, your tax ID, your address, all that kind of stuff, we have an obligation to make sure we have a proper custody of that.
That's right. Yeah.
Couple classics here. Selling away, always something. That's where an agent of a broker-dealer sells an investment, not sponsored by the employing broker-dealer without permission, a classic. Selling away, right? Every firm has written supervisory procedures where you would find these things. We don't want reps saying, well, that was on my 66 exam. I whip out of your employee file, say, here's your signature, where you read about our WSPs, our written supervisory procedures, our policies and procedures about selling away, about anti-money laundering, about insider trading, all those kind of things.
It's a little different, I think, on the 66 than on some of the FINRA exams, because I tell people it's allowed, but with prior notification.
I just want to make sure we got the banner right. That's selling. It's allowed, but it would, with your parameters, wouldn't be selling away. Right? It's not selling away if you make the written notice.
Gotcha. Okay. That's right. Yeah. Where's that boundary? Yeah.
That's right. So it's not a violation if you do it correctly. I make a written notice.
That's right.
And then we should always be aware of insider trading. We're not supposed to trade on material, non-public information. I think the big things are it's civil and criminal, and it's 3 times the profits made or losses avoided. Is there anything else, Brian, that you would like to add to unethical business practices? We hit the big ones. On 66, hopefully you didn't forget about selling dividends, breakpoint sales. Those are all things that are still testable on 66. So
there was, I believe, one of the textbooks, I think it was Kaplan, if I may use their name. They had an appendix B and Appendix C. One was unethical behavior of broker-dealers and agents, and one was unethical behavior of IAs and IARs. And I thought that thing was beautiful because it laid out all of those. I said, you see that? It reads like watching paint dry. It is so boring to read it. But everything there generally shows up on the test. These are the questions that
I
they
like
ask.
it. I'll check that out.
I don't know if they
You
still
are
do
allowed to use Kaplan because yours truly is a authorized Kaplan social media influencer. I will
Oh,
check that. I will check that out. I'll also link in the video description. I have a video lecture on unethical business practices, Brian, with an angel on one side of the guy's shoulder and a
cool.
devil on the other side of the shoulder, where we go through some of those
Do it.
unethical, yeah, yeah, from Animal House, indeed.
Exactly. I wasn't going to say what they actually said.
Do we have anything else before we call it quits on this episode?
No, I think that's cool. I think we got it. We nailed it.
All right. So there is no episode 6. So you're here. You've made it through the entire podcast playlist. Brian and I are also collaborating on other items. I think the next thing you might see is an evening course. Brian has a great course he taught for us, an evening course called Definition and Registrations of Persons, which is just spot on for both the 63, 65, and 66. And maybe we'll rope him into another kind of something like that for us on the NASAA side, because he's really good on NASAA. Now, remember, Brian has free stuff on YouTube, and I will link Brian to that video you said that you have. I'll put in the video description. Comment. But remember, Brian also offers his paid supplements at Test Geek Exam Prep LLC, where you can buy an entire 66 video course with a PDF that includes, I think, the best diagnostic practice test out there. So make sure you check out Brian both in his free form on YouTube, at his paid content on Test. What was it? What's the? Do I have that?
Examprep.teachable.com. That's the video platform. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Cool. So let me get back here.
Yep. Is this where we start crying deep?
Yeah. At the end of the my friend. Oh man, it's been nice. As I say, inch by inch, your Series 66 is a cinch. Yard by yard, your 66 is hard. And you say, Brian?
Keep it simple. Stay with what you know. You take the test. Don't let the test take you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Hey, do drop us a line when you make your mark, because we always like to hear that people have made their mark and got this done. So, we don't have to be your first person you call. Call your significant other, but drop us a line. Let us know what happened to you.
Aren't we the significant other?
Sometimes. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.